I mean, as far as investigative journalists are concerned, they don't fall within the definition of data fiduciaries. I mean, they get their data from data fiduciaries. Actually leave a backdoor with data fiduciaries saying that, you can give the data to anybody or you can give the data to investigative journalists would be problematic. I mean, to specifically exempt would be awkward. Who are not, it doesn't affect investigative journalists at all because they're not data fiduciaries at all. So I don't think it should concern them in any sense. The market is so large. The 12 units that we have approved under the first phase of the India Semiconductor Mission. And these 12 units, what we will see is that they would probably, at their peak production, once they reach full maturity, their production is expected to be only between 8 and 10% of India's total demand by 2031. And electronics is very rapidly becoming one of the largest imports also in the country. It's we have a situation where I think people realize that electronics imports could threaten even oil imports as the largest imports.
Or are they reporting reskilling and something else that's going on?
I think in the ITES sector, what we are seeing is a slowdown in hiring. Okay, the hiring is not at the levels because that's partly because of the uncertainty. But what we are seeing a lot more of is upskilling and reskilling.
So we are joined with a very interesting guest today, and he's Mr. S. Krishnan. He's an 89 batch IAS officer from Tamil Nadu Kata, and he's currently Secretary of the Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology. We are very happy that he has joined us on this podcast, and we welcome him.
Thank you very much, Safi. Great to be with you.
Great to have you here. So we'll just dive straight in.
Sure.
And we'll start off with the favorite subject of the world, which is AI, and how the governance is happening. So at several points in time where you've spoken publicly, you have said that it cannot be contained in just a few geographies, which essentially means the US and China. So the US and China, if they start controlling the whole thing, what will be the implications for India?
I think the important thing, and this is what we advocated during the AI summit here in Delhi as well in February, which is that we need to look at AI in terms of the impact that it is going to have. And as a horizontal technology, like say the steam engine or electricity or railways and so on, which each phase of which led to a significant change in the way that the world operated thereafter and led to significant wider economic impact and economic development, and also led to naturally prosperity and improvement of quality of life of people. AI really holds the potential of doing it now. And India, with its aspiration to become a developed country by 2047, a very important component in enabling that trajectory of growth to actually reach that level of income and prosperity, we would have to leverage technology. Therefore, it's very important that in terms of the positive outcomes of AI, India should share, and India, along with the rest of the global south, should really share those positive outcomes which this form of technology can actually bring. So, which is why inclusion and democratization is so important, so that it actually works for all. And our own outlook in India towards AI is what I would call a very positive and optimistic outlook. Basically, we believe, unlike in many parts of the West, where the apprehension is that it would take away a lot of jobs, and especially cognitive jobs, because unlike previous episodes of technological change where there was more automation of manual jobs, of kinds of jobs that you did with your hands, this time around, the jobs that could get replaced are jobs like the ones you and I do, in terms of cognitive jobs where application of mind is needed, analysis is needed. Most Western countries where the proportion of these kind of office jobs is significantly higher than in a country like India, naturally are at much greater risk. In the Indian circumstance, because these jobs are fewer in number as a total percentage, our risk element is naturally lower. That's one part of it. But looked at positively, given the number of people we have in STEM industries, STEM education, and the number of people who are already in the ITES sector, the potential to use this workforce to become truly the workforce that would develop and deploy AI-based applications and solutions, that possibility is immense. Therefore, straight away, it doesn't attack the number of jobs. Our ITES workforce, which is our predominant white-collar workforce, can be repurposed to do something in the AI space. And by working on AI applications, then that's where truly the rubber hits the road, so to speak, because that's where you see the benefits of AI going into the real sectors of the economy, whether you're talking about manufacturing, whether you're talking about agriculture, healthcare, education, or even governance. And you've spent long enough in government, and so have I, to know that we do not today have the quality of governance that we should necessarily have. We can certainly do better. And there's always a resource constraint, particularly in terms of the number of people you can deploy. And in India, that's a particular issue. And if you can sort of enhance the productivity of people who work in these sectors, clearly the opportunities for growth are immense.
So, are you seeing from the feedback that you're getting from the leaders in the industry, big and small, they must be coming to see you or your officers. So, are they reporting losses in jobs, or are they reporting reskilling and something else that's going on?
I think in the ITES sector, what we are seeing is a slowdown in hiring. Okay, the hiring is not at the levels because that's partly because of the uncertainty. But what we are seeing a lot more of is upskilling and reskilling, so that people are able to adapt to a newer situation. And I think in recent times, some of the results of some of the major IT companies in the country is showing this. Our interaction with the IT companies basically tells us that they see an opportunity now to actually become deployers of AI-based solutions across. So those who were coders and programmers previously, probably you don't need so many of them anymore because AI will write the code for you. But you still need the domain experts and others who will verify whether what AI is doing is right, that human in the loop is important. And in enterprises, even now as you see, many enterprises have not deployed AI in many of the core functions. They've all used AI in some form or the other. But the core operational functions are still not driven by AI. So there's a huge, in that sense, I think the race is just beginning as to how the deployment of AI will take place in different kinds of enterprises.
So globally, do you see the way the US is, especially the Western world, primarily the US, and Chinese have taken to AI and the amount of advertisement that you see about it, and also the private equity deals that are happening of size which is unimaginable. Do you think this is a kind of a bubble, or will it last?
Well, I think if you look at today's investments in AI, it's in a handful of companies. You see the valuation of probably 7 or 8 companies in the US is carrying both NASDAQ and the NYSE index. It is, for a brief moment, Taiwan became a bigger capital market than India, and 57% of the Taiwanese market was just one company.
Yeah.
Likewise, almost 40% of the Korean market was just 2 companies. So you saw such heavy concentration in terms of a limited number, possibly 10 to 15 companies globally, which saw their valuations and which saw investment in them rise hugely.
So is this a bubble?
So which means that it is very, very concentrated. And the potential risks, all of them cannot be winners. And the potential downsides to what happens when, the race is run and one is won and the other is lost, then where do you stand is something which is going to be very interesting.
In the same context, the data centers, the amount of water that they're going to guzzle and the amount of resources they're going to guzzle, they had promised $660 billion of investment, these 8 companies in this 1 year, but they're already not on target. So do you think this hype about data centers is going to die out?
You see, I think the issue with data centers, and it will play out, the interplay is going to be interesting. The issue with data centers fundamentally is that I think globally the thought was that you need about 50 data centers to come up across the country. 50 gigawatts worth of data centers to come up across the country. In India, probably we can target a proportion of that 50. India is a very attractive location for large data centers simply because of the very large grid size that we have, which can give stable power. And two, because you have a fair amount of renewable power in the country. Both solar and wind and other forms of power is a very attractive proposition for many of these large companies. Therefore, there is a push of trying to invest a significant sum of money. So the big valuations that those companies carry and the money that they are raising, some of it is going to get invested in countries like India when the build out of these big data centers take place. Clearly, we have to increase our data center capacity. I don't think that is in doubt. You need more capacity. How far we go and in what fashion we do this is important, because at one level, we will just become a country which exports power, essentially.
And
water to some extent, because you're just supporting a data center which is established to store data for the world. So there is that concern and there is that element of risk. But there is a significant amount of data storage which is needed for the country itself. And there's a strategic advantage in the sense that today, when geographically you control the flow of various things, having data centers located in the country itself gives you some sort of strategic advantage, because you know that you're a significant part and in some ways hopefully an indispensable part of the way the logistics of the AI economy are distributed.
Yeah, great. That's fair. So you spoke of the concentration risk of a few companies, 8 or 9 in the US and 10 odd in China, and the concentration risk in two countries, US and China.
See, right now the signals we are getting from the US are an interesting mix. We are getting into a situation where, we've signed on to the Pax Silica. We were invited by the US and they did it with a fairly big splash during the AI summit. A couple of weeks ago, we had a meeting, the second summit meeting of Pax Silica in Washington, where India was also invited and given a fairly prominent place. So clearly, the theme there is that US looks at a set of countries which will be on their side vis-a-vis China. There is that clear sort of bifurcation of which countries are on that side and which countries are on this side. So to some extent, I don't think, there could of course be some degree of coordination between the US and China on AI, as possibly there was during the Cold War between the US and the Soviet Union on nuclear issues and so on. So to that extent, yes,
so right now the probability you say is lower.
I think some degree of coordination will be there in order to address the more existential risks that something like AI could potentially bring. So, and I think that is a desirable thing. But I think in terms of economic competition, and in terms of the way that AI itself is deployed and what differences it makes to the economies, there I think US would still be very much in competition with China and would look towards other countries with whom they can collaborate and coordinate.
Okay, great. So when we go to chip production, we've also come in and we've offered facilities. We give a big subsidy for that. We are definitely late in the game. The Chinese, South Koreans, Taiwanese, they were ahead of us. Taiwanese, of course. So do you think it would be good to be a seller in a market where there'll be lots of chip producers 5 years down the road, or a buyer of those chips?
See, the point I think is that given the size of the country that we are the most populous country in the world. Our income, per capita income is rising consistently, so which means we are at an inflection point where the consumption and discretionary consumption will go up more sharply, so the market sizes will increase. And electronics is very rapidly becoming one of the largest imports also in the country. I mean, it's we have a situation where I think people realize that electronics imports could threaten even oil imports as the largest imports.
Wow.
So it was an area of concern. And the second thing is, a country this size needs to have an autonomous source of supply of something which is as foundational as semiconductor chips. Third is that I think, especially both geopolitics and what the COVID pandemic taught us, was that you need a diversification in the global supply of some crucial materials, because that's what helps to build resilience. You know, when you're looking at specialization and when you're looking at comparative advantage, and that drives all decision making, you're also building up risks in terms of what happens if there's a geopolitical shock, what happens if there is some other kind of shock. So resilience needs to be built, and there's a cost to resilience, because you're not going to the least cost or the cheapest option. You're going to somebody who's probably a little more expensive,
yes,
but adds to the resilience of the overall world. And I think that's the way India is being looked at now in the electronics and semiconductor space, that we contribute to the resilience. Electronics and semiconductors taken together are today possibly the largest single manufacturing subsector in the world. They've overtaken things like automotive and chemicals and so on to reach that stage. And therefore, India having a role there, I think, is absolutely crucial and vital. And both from the perspective of what we need for our own supplies and how we contribute to an overall resilient global supply chain. So I think from both those perspectives, it's important that India gets into it. We also need to recognize that these are global value chains, that if you pick up a mobile phone today, it would have crossed a national border at least 70 times before it is finally put together. So
70 times.
70. That is the number of times various products and components and things transit international borders before a mobile phone comes into your hand. So we recognize that that is so, but we need to be a significant part of that value chain.
That's a great point.
If you have to have resilience and you support resilience. And that's where I think India needs to continue in this game. And coming specifically to semiconductors, I think ours is a very deliberate and carefully thought out policy. What we are focusing on are not the cutting edge or what are called the leading nodes. There are 2 or 3 reasons for that. One, we don't have a history of semiconductor manufacture in this country. So we have to build that capability first. It's safer to start with a more mature technology where your chances of success are significantly higher. Second, it's also cheaper, because across the world, the semiconductor industry is subsidized by government because of its foundational nature, because of the very cyclical nature and very high capital investment. As a result, it's always subsidized, and the more advanced the node you go to, the more expensive it is. And given what is affordable in the Indian context, it's safer and cheaper to stick to the less expensive and to go for the more mature nodes. That is the second reason. The third reason is that most of the leading producers in the globe of semiconductors, like Taiwan, like Japan, like the United States, and many parts of Europe, have moved on to really the leading edge nodes, so the mature countries. The legacy space has virtually been vacated, and it's almost fully occupied with China. So there's only one other country which can counter the total volume of production that China can achieve. And so for those...
By legacy space, you mean about 25 nano...
By 28 nanometers and above.
28 above.
So
which mostly goes into the simpler products like cars.
It goes into automobiles, it goes into medical electronics, it goes into more strategic electronics.
That's the mass usage of
chips. That's a huge use.
So that's a brilliant point you're making, that we are not going for super high end. We are going for medium end, and your only competitor there is China.
Our only competitor, and therefore, the world needs an alternate source of supply, and that's precisely what we are attempting to do, and that's the segment. That segment, incidentally, is 70% by volume and about 35% by value.
Okay.
So we are sort of hitting that spot where there's reasonable value, but there's a huge volume, and that's a stable volume. So
Excellent.
it's a stable market.
That's a brilliant point. Thank you so much.
So this is the strategy that we have adopted. And then we do a path. I mean, once we build some maturity in this, we continue to research so that we are able to move to more advanced nodes as time progresses.
So all of these developments are happening in the private sector, and with my background in government, it's always been a problem how the government will have a look-see into what the private sector is doing. So once the subsidies are through, then the private sector might just decide to take wing and take off. So how are you going to keep some kind of control over that?
I think the basic thing here is that the manufacturing setup is here in India, and they will manufacture here. And the crucial thing is that the factory has to get built and manufacture needs to take place. So there are two parts to this. One part to this is that they will manufacture provided they are in the market and they are competitive. Subsidies to some extent ensures that they are able to be competitive. The other part of it is that the market is so large. The 12 units that we have approved under the first phase of the India Semiconductor Mission. And these 12 units, what we will see is that they would probably at their peak production, once they reach full maturity, their production is expected to be only between 8 and 10% of India's total demand by 2031. 2031, when these people also all come into production full steam, what they will produce will only be between 8 and 10% of India's total demand.
So each of these 12 will require that ASML lithograph machine?
Some, I mean, the Tata Dholera plant will. Others may not.
Okay, great. So moving on from AI, let's move to the other exciting part of your ministry, which I'm sure occupies a lot of your time, is data and all these platforms that we get on our phones. So WhatsApp, Signal, Telegram, YouTube, all these guys. So what are the exact problems that government faces with them?
It's not fair to say government faces direct problems. You would recall the most critical issue that came up in recent times was with Telegram, where there was traffic which was problematic, including leakage of papers for the NEET exam and so on, and threatened leakage, which sort of threatens the integrity of the system. And the other problem really was that Telegram has certain features which create an issue in terms of how these things are handled. One, it had an edit feature wherein you could go back and edit an older post and add something, which could then mean that somebody attended the exam today, finished the exam, came out with the paper, then took pictures of it and uploaded it in a message that they had put in, say, 3 days ago, and say, see, this paper, I got it 3 days ago. So those kind of features were there. And the worry was that it would create a whole set of rumors. And one thing, again, Telegram can do is create greater virality, because you have features where a message can go to about 200,000, 2 lakh users at one go. So there are certain features of Telegram which create this problem.
So the owners of Telegram were not open to discussion on this?
We did have discussion. We gave them a notice. We had discussions. They were going back and forth on some of these features. And then we took a very deliberate and very calibrated decision, saying that we will ban the usage of Telegram for a limited period of less than a week till the NEET exam was completed, till 22nd of June. 21st of June was the NEET exam, so day after that. And parallelly, ban this feature of editing an earlier message and adding attachments and so on, so that no rumors get created. And as you're aware, naturally this decision got challenged in the court, but the Delhi High Court in its judgment upheld the jurisdiction of the government to take action of this kind, and they found that it was a well-reasoned order and a very calibrated measure that the government had taken.
So how do you implement a ban like this? Which are the agencies that will implement?
Well, primarily we implement the ban. There are two ways, Okay, I think we need to go into the legal aspects of this. there are two major provisions of the IT Act which we operate. One provision of the IT Act is what is called 69A, which gives the government the power to block certain types of content on any of these platforms, provided it falls foul of three major factors. Which falls within the description of, as you're aware, under Article 19(2) of the Constitution, some reasonable restrictions on the right to freedom of speech can be imposed. There are selected clauses where this can be implemented. Those clauses include security of the state, defense of India, public order, and friendly relations with foreign countries. These are four specific grounds contained there. Under Section 69A of the IT Act, the Secretary in the Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology is empowered to block certain content subject to certain procedural requirements if it violates any of these four. In addition, the Article 19(2) also permits restrictions on things like obscene content, on defamatory content, and things which cause contempt of court. But that does not, the power under 69A does not extend to this content. So this is one part. So we very judiciously exercise this power under Section 69A, and there's a process by which there's a hearing. The intermediaries are called. They're told that these are the issues that have been brought to light. So this is one set. Then there's another set where the content violates the other legal provisions, including its obscene or it's defamatory and so on. In those cases, there is something called Section 79 of the IT Act. Section 79(1) of the IT Act provides safe harbor to any intermediary who carries some third-party information, subject to certain conditions. Those conditions are in Section 79(2) and 79(3). That includes if they should not carry any information which is violative of any law of the country, provided they've been given intimation that this is violative of law or the court has ordered. And second, that in cases where there are guidelines which have been issued on how the content should, what it should contain, what it should look. And so detailed guidelines have been issued under the IT rules, intermediary rules in 2021. So what happens in that case is that various appropriate governments, which is state government entities, other ministries, can actually give a notice to the intermediaries saying that there's a violation of this particular law or this provision. So we are bringing it to your notice, and please take it down if you can. If you don't take it down, then you may be subject to prosecution along with the person who originally posted it. So that is the provision of law. That is that the threat of withdrawal of safe harbor. And based on that, very often, a lot of content gets taken down. Previously, there used to be protests against that, saying that there are issues and there's freedom of speech related issues and so on. So that goes back and forth and it gets decided.
In this context, when you look at the recent rules with regard to sensitive personal data, it has been basically said that you cannot put up sensitive personal data without the permission of the person who owns that data. However, what happens to investigative journalism if somebody is putting out?
Okay, I'll come to that question in a minute, Safi. But one thing which I want to point out is both under Section 69 and under Section 79, both where we block content following a due process, or under 79 where there's a threat to withdraw the safe harbor if the content is not removed. The total takedowns which take place based on these requests is actually less than or just about 0.1% of the total content that intermediaries take down. Because intermediaries take down a lot of content on their own based on their community code and based on their own internal community guidelines of what kind of content is permissible or not. So, in fact, most of the takedowns are actually takedowns which intermediaries themselves do. So, I mean, this is something which people are not often aware. What gets highlighted is where government requests a particular thing to be taken down. And that's a very, very small fraction of what gets taken down. So that's for one. Coming to your next question, which is relating to the DPDP Act. Now, the DPDP Act, I mean, this is, again, our understanding, is that there are two categories of people, or three categories. There is one which is a data principal, that is you and I. Our personally identifiable information of any citizen of the country you're the data principal, you own that data. You entrust it to a data fiduciary, which could be any company or any other entity which needs your data, including your employer, including your school, your educational institution, anybody who needs your personal data. You actually entrust it to them based on a particular, based on a clarity on what purpose it is intended to be used for, right? I mean, a social media intermediary could ask you for certain kinds of personal data and you provide it to them on that basis. You go stay in a hotel, they take some data from you for a particular intended purpose, and there is a purpose limitation saying don't use it for any other purpose other than what you've specifically taken my consent for. This is in order to preserve the privacy of individuals, since privacy was recognized as a fundamental right under the Puttaswamy judgment of the High Court, of the Supreme Court. Therefore, we are giving effect to something which was a judicial pronouncement. Having said that, as far as as far as investigative journalists are concerned, they don't fall within the definition of data fiduciaries, right? I mean, they get their data from data fiduciaries. To actually leave a backdoor with data fiduciaries saying that, you can give the data to anybody or you can give the data to investigative journalists would be problematic. I mean, to specifically exempt would be awkward. But it does not affect data fiduciaries at all, because they are people who are not, it doesn't affect investigative journalists at all because they're not data fiduciaries at all. So I don't think it should concern them in any sense. That would be the prima facie view I would take. This is something that I have mentioned to groups of journalists as well.
Oh, you've been met by journalists also?
Oh yes, I've been met by the press club and all of them.
That must have been a difficult meeting.
But I think there was a fair amount of clarity and, at least one could sort of explain to them where their concerns lay and what exactly needed to be done. So I think it'd be a misnomer to say it affects any of that. There was also this thing that the DPDP Act amended a particular clause in the Right to Information Act. Now, in my view, again, that was actually a redundant clause which was included by oversight as, the personal information can be shared when there is an overriding interest. Now, that clause is already available under Section 8.2. So there was one provision which was there as a proviso under Section 8.1, one of the subclauses. There was another clear provision under Section 8.2 where any entity can share data when it is in public interest, regardless of the exceptions that have been provided in Section 8.1 of the RTI Act. So in my view, I don't think, and we've got an opinion from the Attorney General as well, that whether the two sections and the two acts can be read harmoniously together, and he felt that in no way have any of the rights under the RTI Act been taken away. Therefore, in my view, I don't think investigative journalism is in any way affected by the DPDP Act at all.
So investigative journalists also like to create a lot of noise in anticipation. So I guess that's what it must be all about.
Possibly. And I would submit that it's a misreading of the provisions of the Act.
Okay, fine. That's very good clarity. And one last question I'd like to ask you is about regulation. So you mentioned that apart from just MeitY putting out the notices to the fiduciaries to take down some post, I believe that there are other ministries and other departments also now sending out their notices. So is that a good idea to allow regulators to mushroom?
Well, I don't think it's a question of regulation. I think it's a question of bringing to notice, because there are sectoral, there are people who are concerned with different aspects of what content is carried. and they bring to notice their concern, something that comes up which says this is violated this specific act which relates to us. And therefore, you may like to examine whether you want to continue to carry that material, or whether whatever prosecution or whatever action we intend to take against somebody else, you want to be added as an abettor or as part of that particular action. So I think it's not a regulatory action in any.
Oh, it's
in
just
any
a notice.
sense. It is a notice.
69A action will be taken by you.
69A action is taken only by us.
Okay. So that way the regulation is in good place. So thank you so much. That's been an
Thank you.
excellent and
Wonderful
very
to have
clear
you.
and very concise conversation. So thanks a lot.
Thanks a lot. Thank you, sir.